Maverick Physical Therapy out in my parents' backyard in Fremont, Michigan, out on their farms. These grapevines, my grandpa Friends planted these. Man, it must have been 40 years ago or so, and I remember just hearing the stories of this thing. Growing up, I would make my own grape juice, big old quart containers and stuff like that. Did a lot of canning. Always a great thing to have seeds in them, but always a great thing in the fall. The fall, man, I loved it. The grapes were getting ready. We had English walnut trees right here, red delicious apples right next to us. The smell of the grapes, the apple, the farm in the fall, to take a look at and observe all the leaves and the beauty of creation all around. Amazing, amazing thing. And so growing up, I'd harvest these walnuts, I'd sell walnuts, and would, in the meantime, for breaks and stuff like that, and just eating on the go, would come and munch on some grapes. I was always intrigued by how everything ravels. I mean, this is something else. This is to get some fruit. We have some amazing clumps of grapes and stuff like that throughout here. Always amazed at, and when I had to also strip down these grapevines, chop them up, cut them up, thin them out per se, to prune them essentially to create new growth. That's ultimately what pruning of vegetation, of fruit trees and stuff like that does, is hone things in, grows it stronger, helps the tree become more efficient so you can have better fruit. I was always amazed at how these grapevines produce fruit, but how they wound up and raveled literally through everything. And with regards to analogy and how that compares to the human body, is that from fingertips to toenails, we have these incredible meridians and pathways of fascia. So basically connective tissue, whether it's muscle belly, whether it's tendon, ligament, joint capsule, stuff that just meshes together and forms highways throughout the posterior aspect of the trunk, the butt and the hips, the posterior aspect of the legs, through the pelvis and the femur, thoracic, lumbar spine, cervical spine, scapulothoracic joint, ulnohumeral, down to the subtalar joint and through the big toe. It's really incredible how we're this system that's wound up around these trellises and stakes, and how we just grow and wind, and how, like a grapevine that's able to absorb the forces of all conditions, wind and rain and snow and harsh conditions, the body does the same thing. And how this tissue is wound up with the concepts of real and relative motion, real motion being bone motion, osteokinematics, and relative motion being joint motion, orthokinematics. We have this motion that's created and turned on by the eccentric, what we call deceleration and loading of all of this tissue, while using these support structures of bone to ravel up and around three-dimensionally, so rotationally, side to side, diagonally and horizontally, and forward and backwards. But we have all these rotational and horizontal principles that enable parts of the body, bone-wise, to move faster or slower than others, so that these sensory units, these mechanoreceptors and proprioceptors, get turned on so that we can load up and use those as catapults to move us and or objects in specific directions, while maximizing consistency and efficiency with just the right amount of strength, power, coordination, time, and rhythm, balance, and strength and endurance for every effort, and enabling us to repeat that. So as we get into some of our myofascial release discussions and proprioceptive mechanoreceptor like discussions and anatomy discussions, what's going to help us to remember a lot of this is any kind of vining-like structure that weaves, wraps, and moves around something. So the next time you see some vines, whether it's some grapevines, some plants in your backyard, on your patio, I want you to take a look at that, and I want you to think that, hey, if I had some vision that would take me down and through the epidermis, dermis, and maybe subcutaneous layer of tissue, and get onto that cadaver-like form of an individual that we are, and we add and include motion to that, a live human being, motion, to enable us to be able to see and depict what this tissue is doing is an unbelievable thing. To think that the human body is this ingredient book, which it is, don't get me wrong, that we can isolate and break down small little pieces and parts. So for the bigger concept of finding out where origins and insertions are and nerve innervation, totally cool, but we need to be able to put the pieces back together and see the beauty in how that looks together rather than just a piece itself, as that is how, in terms of authenticated functional biomechanical applied functional science knowledge happens and occurs. So the body functions and works as a part, not like an ingredient book in which we just pick everything apart and look at one thing. We're more concerned about motion. We put the notion into motion by taking this holistically primal and fundamental look and perspective on the anatomy of the human body, which we really deeply care about and deeply love. The human body, like a grapevine, set up in the backyard. That's how we operate. That's how we function. That's how we work. We rely upon our body and load to explode to be able to decelerate, to be able to stabilize, so that the eventual responsive movement is just that, a response to the things that took place prior to that, while decelerating eccentrically, stabilizing isometrically, so that we can speed stuff up, slow things down at and throughout various points and transformational zones, so that we can be efficient and maximize our functional skills and maximize our genetic potential. Grapevines, I love these things. I always think of the human being as going back to my parents' backyard and taking a look at this grapevine that's 60 feet, and that's deeply anchored and rooted throughout at different sections, which we'll get into in regards to gravity, momentum, inertia, and ground reaction forces, and how it all starts at the foot. It's really the core, the genesis of all function and all movement. So little work on the grapevine, little fascial winding episode. I hope that you enjoyed this and our further conversation.